I wrote it for one. Yeah. Yeah.
Deacon at the cathedral who churches of the Episcopal Church, yeah. I am in both ears, yep. It has been new and fun. I'm loving it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I asked mine the good old-fashioned way of just bad ear health, like just treating them poorly. And, you know, in the early 90s of sleeping on the seats in the car with your head right next to the car speaker, and, back in the days when they didn't care if you were buckled up or not. Um, but no, so I've had these now for about 4 weeks. Like brand new, brand new. Yeah, yeah. Oh, at first, well, and I can really hear myself, and I'm like, oh, this is what I sound like. Yeah. When I first, uh-huh, so loud. Mm-hmm. Right? It's been one of the things that I was so surprised at was, honest to goodness, having more energy because I'm not exerting nearly as much effort and energy trying to hear people. So kind of by the end of the day, I'm like noticing I'm like not nearly as not as tired as I typically am, and things like that. And mostly it's just really nice to, you're in these like pastoral moments and people are telling you like the worst thing ever. And you're like, what? Say that again. And I love that I'm not doing that anymore. Could you repeat that? You just told me the hardest thing in your life and I need to get it all out. Mm-hmm.
So, so before we actually go live onto the podcast streaming, hi everybody. Glad you're here. Folks will be trickling in, so I appreciate creating some space for the latecomers to come in that way. You're in for a treat. We're gonna have a great conversation. This is Dialogue, a podcast of the Lenten preaching series recorded live at Calvary Episcopal Church in Memphis. I'm Katherine Bush, the Associate Rector for Formation here at Calvary, and I'm delighted to be here tonight with Katie Churchwell and Drew Jackson. I've heard Katie preach, and I'm looking forward to Drew tomorrow, and I'm really excited about this conversation. Katie is the Dean of the Episcopal Cathedral in Oklahoma City. She's also a wife and a mother of three, which we were just chatting parenting stories beforehand. I've heard you enjoy pushing a cart around Trader Joe's, so we can compare Trader Joe's favorites at some point. Drew Jackson is a poet and a preacher from Brooklyn, and he's also part of the leadership staff of the Center for Action and Contemplation, which is a job that he does from New York for this vast organization that's really out west. So, and he is a husband and a father of twin girls. So, beyond the thumbnail bios, and however we kind of quickly tell people about ourselves, we were talking just beforehand about what a typical day looks like, and the answer to that can sometimes be boring. It's like meetings, right? So instead, I'd love to know something that's happened for you in the last couple of days that just brought you a little bit of joy, whether it's vocationally related or not, as we get going.
My youngest, Collins, who's 6, has picked up soccer, and she does not know how to play. And none of the other kids on her team know how to play. And they have so much fun, and they just don't care. And it has been joyful to watch, and also like a little freeing to be like, maybe there are some things in my life I just don't have to care that much about.
Right, yeah, lovely, yeah.
Mine also is sports related. So my daughters are basketball players. They're 11 years old, and I have the joy of coaching them.
Oh, and I'm glad you think that's a joy.
It is the highlight of the week to coach them and to have seen their development over the years. And so we had a game on Saturday, and we lost. Mm-hmm. But it's like, it's just fun, and to watch them just kind of through the course of a game, you have your highs and your lows, and they have to figure out how to navigate through that.
Right.
And I have to figure out how to keep it together on the sideline.
Right. We've seen some coaching, right? Yeah. No, and as I was sharing with y'all, also a mom of twins. Mine are older now, but one of them was a soccer player. And that can get intense. It starts fun. I hope it stays fun.
I'm kind of hoping that all of my children will drop out of sports by the time it requires hours and hours and hours of commitment.
That's an ideal way to go. Yeah. So I wanted to start there in the sense of just these little glimpses of ordinary day life joy that we have in our lives. Partly because one of the things that we want to talk about tonight, some heavier things. We're going to talk about that there's this kind of sense of the weight of the world. There's a kind of, it's interesting to me that words that I think of as kind of more religious or spiritually laden are becoming common in other conversations. So I hear regular everyday people talking about despair and also hope, right? But these things that just, these kind of hefty words are now ordinary words. Right? It's just kind of part of our day-to-day. So I want to talk a little bit about these words and this language and the moment, however you might think about that we're in. And because I want to arc us upwards, we're going to start at the bottom and start a little bit with a sense of what does it mean that the word despair is common? Right? What do you see? What does that look like? How does that impact and again, all of these questions are vocationally or personally, right? So, yeah. What does it look like out there?
I guess I'll start with the word despair, with language.
Good. Yeah, thanks.
And when I hear the word despair, I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can define what that is, but I think about it in the sense of the inability to see beyond the catastrophe.
Okay.
Right? I can't. All I can see is this thing that's falling apart around me, in front of me. I cannot imagine anything beyond it, and that is that place of not being able to see beyond has essentially become the home in which I live every day. Right? And so you ask the question, why has that become a word that's been now just part of our everyday vernacular for so many people? I think it's simply like because that is the everyday experience for so many people when we look at the things that are happening nationally, internationally, the ways that impacts our everyday lives, the ways that comes together with the everyday things of being human, and how do we hold all of that together when we're experiencing, what a lot of folks are calling is like the collapse of empire. That's not a
It's not a small thing.
It's
Yeah.
not a small thing.
Right.
When you see the rise of tyranny, fascism, the ways that impacts people's day-to-day lives, it's like, what do we do with that? Throw on top of that just the sense of like climate catastrophe that's like this kind of impending doom that just hovers in the background that none of us really know what to do with. And all the things just compound. And so I think it's the sense of compounding and that sense of, I don't really know what to do with it all.
Right.
Where do I go with it?
Right.
And
Which
so
is
that-
back to not being able to see.
Not seeing beyond it, so it just feels like a weight you carry.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think just something that I can't see the other side. I can't see past it. What about for you? What resonates? What are you experiencing or seeing?
I think, when I'm talking with people, which I never take for granted that people want to talk to me about the things that are hard in their life, right? We live in a world that says you're not allowed to have hard things because if things are hard, then like you're failing, you're doing something wrong. I mean, I honestly am relieved that despair is such a big part of our common language because that means that people are living in reality, right? Like they're paying attention. Despair is honest, and honest in ways that I think sometimes joy is not.
Right.
And so as I'm meeting with people and I get to talk with them about, both the despair of the intimate, this thing that is really only happening to me, as well as the despair of the collective, I'm like, wow, you're paying attention and your eyes are wide open. One of the words that I wish would come back into a broader use is the word lament, because lament is such an honest way of acknowledging despair. And it's tangible, right? When you look at our Psalms, it is so tangible. You can pick the really nice Psalms, right? But when you're praying the Psalm that is talking about this experience of humanity that is so undoing that the only imagery that comes to mind is to bash the head of your enemy's children, but your enemy's children on rocks. Oh, right? That lament is so powerful and it speaks to a despair that is so real that it can only draw out the things that really aren't holy. But it's that pouring out, right? It is the unleashing of the internal despair that I think allows you to move to hope. If you just keep that in, right? Or just pretend like it's not happening, how do you find hope then?
And I appreciate both the sense of that it means that we're being honest, it means that we're paying attention, right? What's bubbling as you?
Well, you bring up lament, and I thinking of the Lamentations, and just the whole idea of Lamentations and just lament in the scriptures being used as like a funeral dirge, like this. It's the writer, the theologian Soong Cham Ra talks about this a lot in his book Prophetic Lament, and he talks about the idea that in Lamentations, it's with a funeral dirge, it's naming that something in the room has died, and it's not coming back. And so it's the moment where I get real, honest about the fact that something has died. Someone has died. What do I do with this new reality? And, that is, it's like that's what, like we have to touch that reality to be as a part of seeing clearly. That honesty is necessary. And so I appreciate you naming just the fact that even despair is a part of our language is saying something, okay, we're getting a little closer to reality. Because I think one of the things that ails us in America is that we have been conditioned to stay in the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness space. We don't sit long enough with the grief. We don't sit long enough with what has happened. We don't deal with it honestly. And because we don't deal with it honestly, there can be no healing. There can be no repair. And I mean, I could go on and on about that, but I think.
Right.
Well, as you say that, right, like I think about how so much about how we live life leads us to worship, right, the idol of convenience and the idol of things are supposed to be easy. Nothing about our country has ever been easy. History has shown us this is a hard, hard path that we have chosen. And we are going to, and as we've sort of moved now into even greater levels of convenience, how many of you have been having fun with AI? Ooh, it just wrote that nice email for you, didn't it? That was very convenient. One of the things about this kind of path of convenience is that it teaches us that when things get hard, that something's wrong. When in reality, I think about where we're at now in our country, looking at the despair all around, and well, okay, a little bit of a. So we've been having in the state of Oklahoma protests against ICE, and it's been happening in some of our local middle school, high school. And the governor had put out, basically a statement in some form or fashion, basically saying like, hey, school's really for learning, so like the First Amendment's really great and all, but, you really need to be in school. And there was so much conversation about, this thing should be happening. And all I want to say is, what about protest is about convenience? Like, it's that they are actively exiting the convenience of school that makes what they're doing, that makes the action valuable. And this sort of like reliance on convenience and, that things are supposed to be easy. And I don't know, my faith has certainly taught me that most of the valuable things of life, I did not get easily.
Right.
They did not come to me, to my family, to anything easily.
Right.
Like the struggle is so important.
Right. Yeah, and I think the sense of like, if it's hard, I'm not doing it right. If it makes me sad, it must be broken. Right? That we have all these narratives in our head. And I'm appreciating too, as both of you bunch of clergy up here, so immediately weaving in our scripture and our history. So not even just American history and that story, but the really deeper story. And I think sometimes, there's this sense of like, we only read like the cross-stitch version of the Bible, but there's a lot more in there, and a lot of it's hard, and a lot of it's complicated, and the stories themselves are of people kind of trying to find a way forward, trying to see beyond this moment to something greater. I'm part of a wonderful group of women in this Bible study. One of the things that I don't think we have a conversation each week that somebody doesn't say, that's just like right now. Like this 3,000-year-old story, it's just like right now, right? And whether that's kind of at a civic big level or whether that's personal to them, is really striking. I mean, there's this tapping in and this seeing like the comfort of a story that you recognize yourself in. There's some discomfort with we still haven't figured this out, right? So I wonder, are there other places in the Bible where you feel like we could really draw wisdom? The practice of lamentation, right? Reading through the Psalms. So we know that engaging the stories is important, but what else do you see there?
Yeah, where do I start? I don't know.
Yeah, the whole book, right, yeah.
But the thing that's coming to mind for me, we talk about seeing ourselves in the story, in the text. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, over the past few years, in how we read the Bible in American context, and we tend to. We don't tend to recognize ourselves as the dominant empire in the story, right? We don't recognize. That's not how we read text.
This was Tuesday morning.
Yes.
So there's people in the room who are like, oh my gosh, yeah.
We don't read the text that way,
yeah.
And we don't recognize that the text was not written by Rome.
Right.
That those who wrote the text emerged from those who experienced the underside of empire, right? The underside of history. And so to read the text in that way and to see that the text is emerging from struggle, from those who have known what it means to be enslaved and to struggle for freedom and then to fall into captivity again and then right? How does that change the way you read it? And how does it change the way, if you say, so collectively, if we say the we as in the American we, right? We're Babylon in the story. We're Rome in the story. How does that change the way that we ask the question, what does it then mean for us to follow Jesus? Right? It changes things a little bit.
Yeah.
A lot. Right? But I think that is a necessary wrestling for us. And I think it adds a different element to this question of despair and hope. Right? Because I often, one of my favorite texts in the scripture is Mary's Magnificat. And, in Mary's Magnificat, she is articulating this vision of hope. But the way that Mary articulates this vision is she says, as good news, the mighty will be cast down from their thrones. Those who are lowly will be lifted up. The rich will be sent away empty, right? The hungry will be filled with good things. That's good news to those who are on the top and the bottom.
Right, but that should actually frighten me.
But it
right?
should, but it's good news if you can hear it a certain way, right? It's just, but it's just harder for those of us who have been in positions of power and supremacy and, being the top dog to hear as good news to be pulled down from your throne, right? That's why Jesus said it's incredibly difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Because it's like to participate in the kingdom of God is to stand in solidarity in a different way, right, with those who have been on the margins, who have been on the underside. and that it changes the entire way of being in the world. It's good news if you can hear it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, like the throne isn't actually the goal, right?
Right. Yeah.
You
That
know?
climbing up, climbing
Right.
up, climbing up. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a story or a place that you would draw from?
Well, as I hear that, you know, one of the ways in which I think that we sort of sanitize the Magnificat, Anglican tradition and history, right, is we set it to these really beautiful, lovely choral pieces. And then we're like, you know what we should do is we should get these, you know, little choristers to sing it, these with their like angelic voices, right? And I'm like, Mary's fist is in the air, right? And she is calling people into this thing that is going to be so hard. And so I'm mindful, right, that our worship traditions have played a role in helping us to be perhaps distant from that piece of our faith, of our story. I also think too, when we, you know, obviously this is a very complicated thing, but you know, sort of the inability to hear that as good news, I think opens a really big door for things like Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Take a breath, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a perversion, right? It's a
Yeah.
perversion of the hope that Mary talks about, right? And it says, no, it's not actually that. And I, of course, would be like, well, it's very bold to tell Jesus's mom that she was wrong, but okay.
well, I think too, and the reason one of the reasons I pointed to that scripture for like what is wisdom for us in this time is because I think that if we can hear the mighty being cast down from their thrones as good news, it allows us then to see this current moment of, okay, America seems to be losing its grip on the reins. Is that bad news? Is that a bad thing? Depends how you're looking at it. Depends where you stand. Depends your social location, right? And so I think it invites us to ask different questions of the moment and to say, okay, if I step back and I look at things with the long view of history, if I have a cosmic lens on this, how am I invited to see this differently? And as we see differently, how can we then live differently, dream differently, co-create differently together?
And either you're very skillful, or this is where we started. Like, if despair means I can't see past, and then you offer us a way to see bigger, you know, a landscape that stretches, that's part of how we get toward hope, right? That we can see life beyond this, life after this. It's resurrection language, right? That there's something, when something dies, there's something being born. I mean, again, just catching a glimpse of there's more than this moment, right, where I'm stuck. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this, it's you know, to talk about despair in another way, to me, it's when our ability to dream is snatched from us. And there is something about hope that is this injection of the ability to dream again. And I see, I'm thinking about this now because I finished up the manuscript for my next book.
Congrats.
And I'm talking a lot about apocalypse. And right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that is true about apocalyptic literature is that it emerges out of the dreaming, the dream state. And it is this dreaming beyond the catastrophe and casting a vision for it's dealing honestly with the catastrophe, naming it honestly, and also there's this dreaming beyond that is together with it. And so I come often back to Langston Hughes' poem Dreams, right, where he says, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly." right? And to me, that's the crux of it. And that's what the powers that be, they want to take our ability to dream, to say that there cannot be anything beyond this. This is the way things are. But the hope resides in our ability as the collective to say, no, you can't take that from me. And so we keep dreaming.
So where do you see the dreaming happening? What is a glimpse of a particular dream or the practice of imagination and dreaming? Let's look for not just our kids on the sports field, but where do we see it? How do we recognize it? You have a sense of when you've encountered that in your work, in your lives?
So recently, in Oklahoma City, a new statue was erected where Clara Luper led sit-ins as part of sort of the peaceful resistance movement as led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And almost immediately, it was defaced. Not majorly, but noticeably. And that moment, right, for a lot of people in Oklahoma City, it was, okay, everything that we do to tell the truth and to call forward from our past a brighter future, like, what's the point? One of the most beautiful things was that there were a number of people who are talented artisans who worked with the original sculptor and are just committed to continuing to repair and to make whole. I think about that, right? I think sometimes we want to recognize that like hope is real or hope exists when the bad thing stops happening. When in reality, I really think that hope is continuing to do or to say or to believe or to exist in a way that acknowledges that, not that bad things shouldn't happen, but that bad things do happen and right, which is super Episcopalian, right? Episcopalians are like, but right, that, so is it incredibly disheartening that there are people who are committed to erasing the reality of Black people in America? Absolutely. And do I find it incredibly hopeful that there are people who continue in their very small way, in their very singular, particular way? I cannot and should not be repairing sculptures. Like, nobody wants that. But that there are people, and that's their thing that they can do in that moment. And I find that so incredibly hopeful.
Yeah, it's encouraging.
It really is.
Showing up.
Yeah.
Am I good? Okay. Well, as you were talking, this came to mind for me. One of the, in my opinion, one of the great prophets of hope of all time, but certainly of our time, is James Baldwin. And, there are two things that Baldwin says about hope that I feel like they're on repeat for me quite often. One of them is that he said, I believe he was given an interview with Ebony magazine, and he was asked a question about hope, much like this conversation that we're having now. And he said, hope is invented every day. And hope is invented every day. That it is not this passive thing that you just exist in, but it is a practice that you show up to day in and day out, that you choose into day in and day out, that requires a making of sorts, a making of something beyond the current moment, beyond the catastrophe. And so I think about that a lot as, okay, today, how do I show up to hope? Tomorrow, that might look different because of what the day might throw at me, what the day might ask of me. And so I think about that a lot. And I also think about his quote when he was, again, asked about hope. He was asked about hope often.
It's been a perennial question.
It's been a perennial question. And he said, but he was asked more on the flip side of it about despair. And he said, I have never been in despair about the world. I have been enraged by it. But I can't be in despair. I can't tell my nephew or my niece that I'm in despair. We can't tell the children that there's no hope. And it's just like, there's something there that's just the responsibility that we have individually and collectively to our children. As to, like, I can't hand my girls a vision of the world that says it's beyond salvation, that there's nothing here. And so I have to struggle. And they see me struggle with it. But in the small acts, right? It's not the large sweeping things, the large sweeping movements of change. It's the small acts, right? It's the there's a community of people that meets down San Diego, the border, called the Border Church. And I think about this community often because it's one of those small glimpses of, okay, what could this look like? And it's really a community that's divided because some of them live on the American side and some of them live on the Mexico side. Many of them have been separated and cannot see each other, but they venture to the border when they're allowed, and it really depends on who's on guard for the day. And they gather at the border at this place in the fence where there are these little holes, and they kind of see each other through, and they give each other what they call finger kisses. That's how they greet each other, with a holy kiss, you know, and they take Eucharist together at the border, and they do this in the presence of the guards, right? And it's this witness to, hey, this wall here is not the most real thing. There's something that's more deeply real beyond this, right? And we're bearing witness to that. And by you standing here and keeping watch, you're bearing witness to that, right? Those are the kinds of, and it's like, I feel like that's the vocation that we as the people of God are called to, is to bear. It's not to not deal honestly with reality, but it's to bear witness to something, to the full scope, I would say, of what reality is. That reality is not just, hey, everything is terrible, but the full scope of reality is there's something new that's emerging, as the prophets talk about, as Isaiah talks about, right? Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Can you perceive it? Do you see it? Right? So it's to ask people to see that which is emerging, even in the midst of the chaos. Yeah.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
A question for you then. How do we discern, right, what is chaos and what is God's holy handiwork? Because, you know, I get to work with this with people all of the time. And sometimes, right, I'm finding, you know, this is good news for Christian educators. Like, there's more work to be done in terms of really forming people in the reality of what our faith means, right? That more than like memorizing a story, right? But, you know, like the number of times that we gather, right? And we're like, we're resurrection people. And then it's like the children's garden goes away or something. And it's like, now everything is ruined. Everything will be terrible forever, you know, and I'm like, I mean, and that's a silly example, right? But like, the realities of our humanity undo our faith, right? And we have to intentionally choose to pick it back up and bring it back into a picture that makes sense. Yeah. And what's really hard right now, and maybe always, right, is trying to figure out in this mess, in this chaos, what is God and what is not God? Mm-hmm. Because boy, Satan is tricky. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that's coming to mind for me is, one, we were talking about this a little bit earlier at the table, but there's something profound about the fact that within the biblical narrative, at the very beginning, chaos is included. Right. Chaos is included from the beginning. It's the world is created from the chaos, right? So when we ask the question of what's chaos and what's God and what's not, God does something with the chaos all the time, and I think that's part of the invitation of what it means for us to be human and to reflect this image of God, is to say, what do we do with the chaos? I think about that a lot in relationship to just the story and the journey of being Black in America, is that we have always had to do something with the chaos. It's the blues note, right? It's including the dissonance to make something that's just profound, right? It is the taking the scraps, the food scraps that they didn't want to eat up at the plantation house, and turning that into cuisine, right? There is something.
This is the material.
This is the material. This is the material out of which something beautiful emerges, but it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's in our hands, and so to me it's not a sense of like, so yes, there are some very clear things of like, okay, I can say with conviction that seeing 153 schoolgirls in Tehran killed is not of God. Yep. It's not. Does that, is it possible that through that chaos something of God can emerge? Certainly. I can't say what that is. I have no idea what that is, right? And so I think it's that both end of it, where it's like we have to name evil for what it, like there are just things that are just evil.
Well, it's interesting. One of the words that you guys have both used in this conversation a couple of times is the word catastrophe. You just described a catastrophe, right? And what's bubbling in my head. I've raised a Lord of the Rings reader who'd be very proud of me right now, because I'm going to talk about Tolkien for just a second. But he has this word that he invented words and actually whole languages. But one of them is, he called it a eucatastrophe, which is that our Eucharist comes from there, right? And the way he talked about that was the surprise element that came, that you can't say, well, this happened. It's not even the same that this happened for a reason. That's not helpful, right? But that I can be surprised somehow in the catastrophe, in the chaos, and see, find, feel something that's still of God, that's still beautiful, right? So that I just think, and again, appreciating the humility of we can't always say what it's going to be, but it's a particular gift, I think, for people of faith to say, I can be surprised by the work of God, right?
And I find that, as I get to meet with people, it's often when they are expecting to be surprised by God, and what they receive is perceived silence from God. That I see as being this like really hard place, right? Where all of those kids are dead now. And it's not that God can surprise us in that. It's God let that happen. And, and that, right, is where, again, I really think, it's really important when we are talking about despair to experience despair in community and not in isolation, right? Yeah. It's the perceived silence of God in the chaos that I think, you talked about, right, despair is the dream being snatched from you. And I wonder, too, where there's room where we just say, just take the dream. Just take it. My heart can't handle this anymore.
So we're talking then about, and bringing community into it. We're a little community. This is a community, right? We're part of these places and spaces that are not metaphors. This is a real room full of people, right? And to do things together, to talk honestly together, to be witnessed, to be seen, to be heard. So as we sadly approach the end of, this is just fast, right?
Wow.
We started with with this sense of these are the little moments in my life that I see joy. This is how I experience despair and things like that. So I'd love to hear just a little moment of community, right? Of that sense of, because I do think that that's one of the places that we remember how to dream, that we are honest, that we're seen. So if you have a place in mind where I can be held here, I can be honest here, I can trust here. I think we're fortunate to have those places. So to honor them and name them, I'd love to.
First, the very best community for me is a community where I draw to my family of origin and my friends, in large part because they know me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Known, we're seen, yeah.
Yeah, right. So this version that you all see, they all, right, they see that too, and they're very nice about it. But they also know all of the really dumb stuff that I've done and the really painful parts of my life, and there's something about community, right, where of the people who know your story, who can reflect it back to you when you're just so deep in the trenches that you can't remember your own story, let alone the stories of faith. And I'm so incredibly lucky to have that, and I've worked incredibly hard. Like my family of origin, we've done the counseling, the therapy, we've done the recovery work, we've worked really hard to have that. And now that I have it, it's so glaringly obvious to me when I'm not in that space, right?
Right. And where you started that's hard work to get something, right? It's not convenient, it's not easy, right?
No. And it's painful.
Right, also true. What about for you?
Yeah, I go to my family as well, where and it's there's something about when you go through stuff with people, and my brothers and I, my dad, and we were all in the room when my mom died. We were standing there in the hospice. You know what I mean? So when we encourage each other towards hope, we know what it feels like to stand in the room where someone dies. We know what it feels like to sing the funeral dirge together. And so there's something about that where like, hey, it might not be all of us together feeling it. It might just be that there's one of us who can keep encouraging us to keep looking forward.
Right.
Right. It might be that.
Right.
And I experience community that way, where it's we do it for each other. We hope for each other.
Right.
It's not this. It's not always this individual thing. I got to drum up. Sometimes I got to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that's what the experiences of it more often is our leaning on each other and reminding each other of something even when we can't see it.
So very swiftly, I just want to say, I mean, this sense of like, I just met y'all, and I feel like we have all been able to lean toward each other in this conversation, and I hope that that's been the sense of those who are here in the room and those who are listening, and your folks back in Oklahoma, hi, they're having a watch party.
If we could keep going, I would tell the story of our cathedral, I promise.
We've all got more stories, right? There's so, and that's encouraging that we can't talk about it all. That there are good stories, there are more communities, there are more signs, there are more dreams, and I'm so immensely grateful for your real presence here in this conversation and for this time tonight. And with that, we bring this part of the conversation to just a momentary close and say thank you to those who are listening, and wish them Godspeed in their journeys. So. And that does mean that we get to tell more stories, so you don't have to be done if you had something else that you wanted to say. But we're